Hi everyone, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads. In this Better Beader episode, we are going to go over the essential things that I think that you should learn even if you're not intending to do a lot of wire working. This sprang out of a Facebook Live that we did this past week where I was giving helpful hints about perfecting your wire working and simple little things to think about as you're creating even something like a drop earring. I'm going to be working with 24 gauge wire, one of the simplest wires to work with, very flexible, easy to bend, even for those arthritic fingers if you're starting on that. I'm going to show you the different techniques and the ways to hold the pliers, as well as helpful hints so your beads hang correctly, your loops hang correctly, and you don't crack any of those crystal briolettes that you may be using or working with. If you want to, you can grab some pliers, practice along, and figure out how to perfect some of your basic, very basic wire working skills. I'm going to be showing you some of these helpful hints and things to pay attention when you're doing simple wire working using some 24 gauge artistic wire, and I have the copper color here. I do a lot in silver, but you can see it's a little bit hard to actually see. So while I'm showing these tips, I'm going to be using the copper wire so it's a little bit easier to see against the bead mat. When we started out our Facebook Live this week, we were talking about how to create an entire piece just with one piece of wire. This stemmed from this week's video, the Tahiti bracelet, and working with 24 gauge to create a bracelet or a pair of earrings. One of my pet peeves is sloppy wire working. If you're taking 2 hours to make a beautiful pair of earrings, or if you're taking 5 hours to finish up a bracelet that you need to attach a wire clasp, you want to make sure that your clasp or your ear wires or your actually bracelet findings match in the texture, the detail, and the perfection of your beadwork. Many people that do bead weaving tend to shy away from wire working just because it's not them and it's frustrating to them. This is where I would suggest just get some 24 gauge wire, silver, copper, gold, doesn't matter. I like the artistic wire because it's a dead soft, very easy to bend. Again, even if you have trouble with your hands or with the muscles there, this is going to be really easy to work with. I have a couple different crystals sitting here to go over some things you want to think about as you're getting ready and as you're starting your wire working techniques. I have many wire working videos. You can check out the links below. Also, don't forget to give your opinion below on the tips and the tricks that you have for others in this beading community. I always tell people during these Better Beader episodes to please comment below, sharing your opinions, your tricks, and again, those tips to help out this beading community. So I have some 24 gauge wire here. And the first thing I want to show you is how to work with the wire to create your own sort of stackable earring design. If you have a bead that doesn't have, or a piece of wire that doesn't have a head pin at the bottom, a head pin at the bottom is going to work to stop the bead from falling off the end of the earring. When you're working with plain wire, you can make your own head pin if you want to. You can do this with working with your round nose pliers and doing a simple swirl at the base of the project. You can take the project here, take your round nose pliers, where you can see the wire between the two jaws of the round nose plier, but not feel it coming out of the top of the plier. You know you're holding on to it if you move your pliers and it's sitting in there. You're going to simply round your wire out and make a tiny little loop. That tiny little loop, you can then take a pair of chain nose pliers, making sure that they're flat on the interior, and create a little spiral look by bending the wire as you hold the pliers and twist it and turn it just in that nice little rolled coil. Whenever you're ready to stop with that coil to add your beads to the top, you're going to take your pliers, intersect that wire perpendicular, and just bend the wire, the longer piece, up 45 degrees. Anytime you are working with wire, the goal of the wire should be, as you're creating your straight piece of wire, or a wire that is going to have a bead on it, you want to draw an imaginary line from the bead through the middle of it with the wire, and make sure a loop that you're making at the top, or even adding that spiral to the bottom, that it is going to sit directly below the piece in the center. You don't want that to be off to the right or to the left and off to the side, or it's not going to hang correctly. So the nicer you get that bend up to 45-degree angle, looking that it's coming out the center of that loop, the nicer your project is going to be. I'm going to cut my wire down just a little bit so I have an easier working piece. And I'm going to add on here one of my crystal oval nuggets. Once you add your bead on, you want to look and see and make sure again that it's going right through the center of the design. You can also take this little swirl or this design at the base, move it down a tiny bit, and bend it up onto your project. Again, making sure that if you draw an imaginary line, it's coming straight out from the base of that crystal. Here at the top, I'm going to make what is called an eye pin or a loop. Not only am I going to make the eye pin, I'm going to coil the eye pin. To do so, I'm going to leave just a tiny bit of space right there, about 1/8 of an inch or even less, right above the piece. Just enough that I have room to do 3 coils with my 24 gauge wire. I'm always going to leave that space open. I don't want to hold it with the pliers and bend the wire above. What that does is that hides the wire that I'm working with, and I can't really see the distance that I'm leaving. I want to leave that distance, see the distance that I'm leaving it, hold that wire, and bend my pliers to the back. That bend is going to leave just that little bit of wire that I needed on top of the piece. The nicer you get that to a 45-degree angle, the nicer your eye pin is going to sit right in the middle of the piece. Grabbing my round nose pliers, I'm going to make a loop. You'll notice my pliers have little black Sharpie marks on it. That's a size that I like and that I use often to make a chain link style jewelry. You can make different marks on your pliers with different colors if you want to. They'll eventually come off, or you can just take some rubbing alcohol and remove them. This is going to help if you make marks to make your loops consistent. If you have a piece of jewelry like a rosary chain where you're making them over and over and over again. I'm going to make a little bit of a smaller loop, and you'll notice that I have that wire coming straight out the back. I'm going to take the wire over the top of those round nose pliers jaw, switch from that top loop by rotating my hands to the bottom loop. I'm not going to go in depth in this because I have a video on it you can check out for coiled eye pins, and then bend that wire to the back. Once I'm done with that wire and that loop, I now have what's called an eye pin. It's that loop sitting right on top of the base of that wire. To coil it, I'm going to just kind of look at it here and make sure that it's still established. If I draw that imaginary line from the base of the wire through that loop, through that pin end, that it's going to sit right in the middle. Rather than hold over the entire thing, I don't want to hold over the wire anytime where it's crossing over itself. So if I have a briolette, which I'm going to do next, and I have wire that's crossing over itself, I want to make sure that my pliers are holding below that or above that, because I don't want to put any tension on a place where the wire is crossing over one another. I'm going to hold, if this was a head, from the nose up with my needle nose pliers, leaving the bottom half of that loop exposed. Go ahead and coil the wire down toward the bead, tightly around the base wire, creating almost a noose look. I tend to do 3 coils. I'm going to go in with my wire cutters. You want to invest in a nice little wire cutters. I have the Sparkle tool set here by Beading, and I want to go with the flat side down toward my project. The V side, or the side that has kind of that opening or that little divot, goes toward the top. Go ahead and cut off your extra wire as close as you can. The next thing you're going to want to pay attention to is just that little tail there that's sticking up. The little tail can be kind of the death of people. People hate that little tail. When you're talking about a necklace or a bracelet, it can rub. Earrings, honestly, it's not that big of a deal, but it does drive people crazy because you can see it sits a tiny bit off to the side there, out to the left. I'm going to take my pliers, and you'll notice I'm not gently guiding that into place. I'm going to go and I'm going to almost hold my pliers so that it's perpendicular to the wire there and press it down. That's going to pinch that wire in right next to the piece. Lastly, I need to focus on how I'm going to attach this eye pin to, say, my ear wire if I'm doing an earring. My little loop that I've done here, my little coiled base, I want to make sure that I can see that and that my earring is not going to sit off to the side if I add it to an ear wire. You'll notice if I add it right here to just this brass little ear wire, my loops are facing the same direction. That's going to make my earring hang off to the side. With my hand, I press down on that thin 24 gauge wire, grab my pliers, and turn that eye pin so that it is front facing. Now my earring will hang correctly as I simply open up that loop, sliding it to the side rather than pulling back, hang my earring, and close it up. So you always want to be mindful when you're making these coiled eye pins, the tops of earrings, whether or not you're working with a head pin, how that eye pin is going to be facing so that way it hangs correctly on your jewelry. Likewise, you have the same issue if you're talking about something like this watermark pendant or even a briolette. You're going to have two different ways that the holes are going in these designs, and that's going to affect how you're going to work with your wire. This one here, the watermark, has the hole to the front of the project. This briolette has it through the middle. Same deal when you're talking about these two shapes. You want to think about how you're going to attach the wire and how you're going to make your eye pins and attach them to a piece or a pendant. If I have the watermark pendant and a front-facing loop, it's going to be difficult to put a piece of chain or cord through there. I'm going to want to make sure to go in with my pliers and turn that loop so that way I can't even see the loop. I just see one piece of wire from the side. It'll sit correctly then on my piece of jewelry. If I'm going to go into the watermark pendant, this is my coiled loop here, and I'm going to add beads to either side, still with wire working. You are going to want that loop to face forward. That way when you add your next beads or wire in that chain link section, here's your next loop, here's your next bead. That pendant's going to sit nice into the front and nice and easy. You're going to have two coiled links that sit one to either side, and you're going to alternate the way the loops face so that way they link inside one another as you create and connect your next beads. Those links and the way that they hold and the way that they sit are important so that way your pieces sit correctly. When you're talking about a front-facing pendant like this, you're going to put your wire through so that way you have a longer piece on one side and a shorter piece on the other. Just like a briolette, you're going to want to make sure when you are crossing wire over top in order to make it hang down or a bail style, that you do not want that crossing to happen too close to the pendant. That's going to not allow you enough space to hold with your pliers, nor is it going to be the safest for the crystal. I went ahead and wrapped one really, really tightly so I could get this effect. And you'll notice many times with a briolette, if you try to wrap too tight, that top of the briolette is very thin and it can very easily snap off. So to avoid that in both the briolette as well as a front-facing loop like this watermark, you're going to take the shorter piece of wire and the longer piece of wire and have them cross over, creating an X right on top of the piece. Leave yourself enough room that my suggested plier of choice is my round nose plier. If I can hold there with my round nose plier, I know that I have enough space in between that the pendant can still free hang a little bit, move around, and it's not too tight that I can go ahead and kind of alter the top of that by breaking it off. The first thing I'm going to do after I create that little V section is take my needle nose pliers and take that wire again and bend it 45 degrees up, just like we did after our little coil. With my needle nose pliers, because they have a smaller jaw at the top, I'm going to take now and hold below that crossing point. Remember, I'm not going to hold where it crosses because I don't want to ever hold where wire crosses over itself. It can hurt the integrity of the wire. Take your smaller wire and bend it once or twice coiling around the longer piece. You can see if it's harder to do that coil there and you have it further apart, take your pliers and simply press it together. Take your wire cutter and cut that extra wire off. Once again, before I do my next loop or before I add another bead, I'm going to go in with those chain nose or needle nose pliers and simply pinch that little end down. That's going to make that wire come straight out from the top, so that way you have a nice product when you're going in and creating your second loop for your piece to hang down from. I'm going to go ahead here and add a bead on top of this. So I'm just going to grab one little crystal, add this little rondelle to the top of my wire, and we're going to do that coiled eye pin once again on top of the piece and on top of the pendant. Remember, I want to think about how I'm using this. If I'm using this to just string onto a cord, I want that loop or that bail to be facing that I can only see the wire, and I have to look to the side to see the loop. If I know that I want to attach to either side and kind of build off the sides, you're going to want to have that loop be front facing. I'm going to picture that I'm going to make a bail out of this. Just like before, I'm going to take my needle nose pliers, leave a little bit of space, hold on to that crystal, and bend the pliers back 90 degrees. Go in with my round nose plier, and I'm going to do a bigger loop here because I want to be able to get my cord through. So where you hold on your round nose pliers are going to end up instructing you about how big that loop's going to be. I'm going to take the wire over top of the round nose pliers till it touches on the other side. Because this wire is rather thin, I'm going to double this up and make a little bit more of an impact of a bail. I'm going to slide my pliers and my wire opening and closing so I make another loop right beside the first, almost like a spring ring. So I have two loops right beside one another to give it a little bit more volume. From here, same deal. I'm going to hold from the nose up and coil down from the top toward the bottom. 3 coils, I'm good to go, and I'm going to cut off that extra wire to finish off the look of this watermark pendant. Go ahead in then and squeeze that down. If you want to, you can take your fingers then, spread these apart, and make more of a little V bail. That space above the pendant is going to leave you enough space that it can move around and you're not going to chip your crystal. We're going to do the same thing for the briolette, and I'm going to show how to do that loop as well. And the same thing for a 2-hole bead, where you're going to use that loop at the bottom and the top if you want to use that in a setting and connect the 2 pieces together. So with the briolette, just like the watermark crystal here, we're going to take our our wire, take about 1 inch over to the left-hand side, the right I'm going to keep long, cross that thin wire. This is why I like to practice and start with a 24 gauge wire. Cross that wire so it sits right on top of that briolette. Once again, don't get too tight because then you can chances of kind of chipping off the top of the briolette pretty strong. Hold with your pliers here after taking your needle nose and bending up that straight piece or that eye pin like piece nice and straight up. Imaginary line from that wire down through the center of the briolette. Wrap that wire around once and twice around the piece. How many times is up to you. Cut off that extra wire flat side down. Cover with your hand so the wire doesn't kind of spring away from you. Grab your pliers and pinch that down before you put on your next bead. If you don't want to put on another bead, once again, you need to think about how it's going to hang on an ear wire. So we realized from this one here with our nugget oval that we need it to hang so we can see that loop. Knowing that and not wanting any space between those, I'm going to take my needle nose pliers and bend the wire pretty much right after that coil. Grab with your round nose pliers so you can see the briolette's facing forward or it's to the side there as I'm creating my loop. Going over the top, switching from that top jaw to the bottom jaw. And now when I create here, I want to coil so that way I'm coiling opposite of the coil at the bottom. That's going to make for a nice, easy, simple line that the coils will match up to one another, or you can keep going and coil along the briolette. Actually, I'll keep the wire on for you and I'll show you that look. You can keep going with extra wire. You may see a lot of earrings like this, where they're actually going to cover up the top of the briolette. You can see I'm wrapping around that little triangle section, pushing the briolette into the middle of this little cone that you've created. Once you're done here, once again, go in with that little end tail and just pinch down to create that nice kind of coiled look. A tiny bit more wire would have been great for me to include on, and that hangs down from there. Same deal, this loop, it's going to hang nicely as I go in and do that front facing ear wire. Those are some helpful things to think about when you're working with coiled eye pins, when you're working with coiled loops, leaving just enough space, but not too tight for those 1, 2, 3 coils at the top of the eye pin. Thinking about the fact of which way you need that eye pin to sit on your pendant or on your piece. Making sure that if you do create your own eye pin, head pin, that the base of it is sitting directly below that center bead or that center piece. If you're creating a bail-like finish for a briolette or even a pendant, you want to make sure not to get too close to that top. These are very, very simple, minute details that will really, really change the look of your wire jewelry and make it look much more professional in nature. As always, these Better Beader episodes really are designed to make you a better beader. Keep in mind you can share your opinions as well as, again, your tricks and your tips and your praise if you want to, there in the comment section below. It's always a great way to see the interaction of the comments as well as the content that you'd like to see. In addition, if you haven't yet, make sure to click that subscribe button. I've noticed a lot of you don't subscribe, and I'm worried that you might miss stuff here from us at PotomacBeads, especially helpful videos like this. If you want to see more wire working videos, make sure to give a little thumbs up, and we'll get those on the schedule as well. As always, if you do need any supplies to practice that wire working skills or to up your beading supplies and stash, check out the links below to shop with us online at PotomacBeads.com. You can always also show your designs, your wire working techniques, and your wire working proud moments and pieces in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. As always, thank you so much. I hope that this episode helped to make you a better beader and a little bit more confident in your wire working skills.